I'd like to call our regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education to order. Please, if you are able, please join me in standing and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next we'll move on to item 3, approval of the agenda, and I would look for a motion. Jim?
I move adoption of the agenda with the addition of the human capital addendum to be added to item 6B.
Second.
Thank you. All right, moved by Jim, and I think that was seconded by Tracy. All in favor, say yes.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. Motion passes. All right, next we will move on to the recognition of the audience. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and home school district for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but it is not obligated to respond to or debate issues in this forum. This evening, 2 speakers have signed up to address the board. Each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 3 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker is asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the speaker's time at the podium. I will now call our first speaker to the podium, which is Paul Moore.
Good evening. My name is Paul Moore. I live in North Fargo. First, Devin sent me with a message. He sends his regards, and he's looking forward to seeing you next time. I know that I was asked not to be profane, but that doesn't count. With the understanding that you won't respond, again, talking to the parents and the people who are watching online, mills are confusing to most of us. A 9% increase in mills translate to $6 million. Money that you and the city commission want Fargo to pay the schools without a detailed explanation as to why. A few years ago, the mills in Fargo were drastically reduced to get to the 127 that they're at now. The budget relies on an increase that is not passed yet. What makes you think that there's actually going to be a 9% increase? Why do you think the people in Fargo will just pay it, including thousands of persons who don't have kids in the school? What do you think, what are you going to do when it doesn't happen? But good news, there is an increase coming from the state that was legislatively approved. That too was almost $6 million, but not enough, so the total in is $12 million. That's just the income portion. Now the expenses, good to know. Some of the money is going to teacher pay. Trying to keep the math simple for myself. So a 9% increase in my taxes is going to be a 9% increase in the teacher pay. No. 9% is only going to be 6.8% for the teachers. So a $4 million expense against a $12 million increase in revenue. So I ask myself, where does the rest of the $8 million go? What does channeling the money to non-teacher parts of the budget do to increase the grades of the students? Some of my questions, line 133 about the tutors. What do we get for a 4,000% increase in that part of the budget? I mean, that's way more than 9%. A 4,000%, that's doing the math, it's 42 times higher than last year. Consultants, a 124% increase. What do consultants do? Textbooks, 112% increase. Looks like we fell for that same deal the cable company gives us. Buy this great rate and it'll be fine. And then the free stuff runs out and then the cost doubles. What would you get from saying a thing about the veterans tax credits? More veterans are taking advantage of the veterans tax credit. Does that mean you're more interested in getting money from veterans who are disabled versus them getting their taxes, somewhat lightened up because they served their country and ended up with some sort of injury? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jess English Titleman.
Thank you. My name is Jess English Titleman. I have 2 kids in Fargo Public School. I live in Fargo South, and they are both in high school. Actually, one graduated, and I have one who will be entering junior year. I am here to again thank the board and Dr. Gandhi for taking a stand against the bullying of students by teachers and staff and other students. I thank you for rejecting bigotry. I thank you for acknowledging the facts of human biology and defying legislators and a governor who are spreading lies and misinformation about human biology and human sex to create laws that ban, bully, and belittle human beings for being who they are. For thousands of years, rabbis acknowledged 6 genders. Even 2,000 years ago, when Jesus walked the earth, it was well known that human beings are not born only male or female. Just through the simple process of human observation, rabbis, doctors, midwives, and nurses were able to see that human sex is not a binary. What kind of world are we creating for children not born on the binary? Even these legislators who go around saying male and female all day to spread hate had to acknowledge the facts of human sex and made a variance in the law for people, babies, born where a sex cannot be determined. What kind of world are these babies going to have to face? One where the rest of the population does not know they exist. One where they will be made to explain to the ignorant masses the actual facts of human sex. One where they will be denied the hormones they might need. One where surgeries will be forced on them before they are old enough to talk to make them more likable for their parents. Surgeries that leave them with lifelong issues that they did not need. What will their parents and teachers and peers think of them? 156 million people are born where a sex cannot be determined. This isn't rare. This isn't something that's just one every million years. Many of us know redheads. I've met several, probably more than a dozen redheads in my life. They are the same amount of population as children who are born intersex. Thank you. Thank you for creating a world that is honest, a world where every child is welcome and honored as they are. Thank you for taking action, and thank you for making more possible.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our report section. First, we'll start with our FEA report, and I think I see Grant. Welcome to the podium, Grant.
Thank you. We had a couple of opportunities recently as the FEA to be present at new teacher and new staff member orientations. And it was a really good opportunity to explain some of the work that FEA does, but also to point out the ways in which FEA strives to be collaborative where we can with the board and with administration. We always enjoy seeing those new faces into our district and being a part of the welcoming process that our district does a good job with. We also recently had a meeting where Dr. Gandhi and President Birkeland and I were together to talk about some ways to look towards collaboration this school year and to have more proactive discussions as we go through a new school year. So I look forward to whatever might become of implementing those discussions. As for your business section tonight, memo number 25 has concern amongst the FEA Negotiations Committee. It is improper to assume that the board's proposals will be implemented prior to agreements on those being reached at the table. Examples within memo number 25 include assuming the board's salary line item prior to that being agreed to. Also includes the assumption in the preliminary budget of a catalyst stipend, which has not been agreed to. Neither of those have been agreed to at the negotiations table, and to make assumptions like these, that they will be implemented prior to reaching mutual agreement, seems to fly in the face of the mediation process that we are attempting to engage in. If we're not going to conduct negotiations together on our own, as FEA has repeatedly asked of the board, then we need to allow the chosen community members to provide the assistance that we have asked them to provide us. Unilaterally approving your own proposal is simply not the right thing to do. I believe it would demonstrate good faith and intent to reach a ratifiable agreement through the mediation process to make a motion tonight to table the preliminary approval of the budget, given that negotiations is still ongoing and that we're on a pathway toward a conclusion through the mediation process. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Moving on to the superintendent report, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. I'll just touch base on a couple of things. I'll start briefly by just talking a little bit about the budget that's in front of you as well. Tonight, the board has asked, just because it was brought up, the board has asked to approve the preliminary budget. You are required statutorily, based on timelines, to have the budget approved. And while administration has no intent to get in the way of negotiations or to make the board do anything that would go against the negotiation process, budget planning is dictated by state statute. We have timelines that we have to meet, and then you're also approving a preliminary budget. So should there ever be changes to the budget, that gets approved down the road. Secondly, as you know, in an organization with our scale, budgets have to be based on an assumption. There's a series of assumptions that we have to make when we start the budgetary process. Sometimes we don't even know what the property tax rate is going to be for our district, and then we'll have to change that as well as we get information from the county and the city and so forth. So those are just pieces that we have to do. So I fully respect the position of the FEA, and I don't think that the board is trying to negate the mediation process, but just wanted to know that you do have a responsibility based on state statute to approve an overall budget based on timeline, and some of those pieces can't wait until a negotiated agreement is reached because those are two separate processes. At a governance meeting recently, we also talked about enrollment updates that normally are given during the start of the school year, just as an FYI for the school board. And we talked about incorporating those into the superintendent report as well. I have access to the enrollment data to give you an enrollment update, but things change so fast this time of year, and there's so many implications around that. I'm just going to yield that to Missy, because with every change that we have in enrollment, she can contextualize the data in terms of what does that mean for staffing, what does that mean for sections at elementary schools, and some other pieces as well. So I'll let her do the enrollment update.
I actually really do love enrollment. So what we do is every Monday we review the numbers and we look at it through a couple of lenses. So on Monday of this week, we were at 11,204 students. And then we always compare that to last year, the same week of the year. And last year at this time, we were at 11,155. RSP is predicting that Fargo will be at 11,437. And RSP has been very accurate. One of the hardest grade levels to predict is kindergarten as we go forward. So the numbers that I give you are the numbers that they're fully registered in our system. And we have about 250 kids that are parents and families who have started the registration that are not in our numbers yet because they haven't finished. And so that does put us on track, right where RSP thought we'd be. So for example, then we have about 616 fully registered kindergartners, and we have 150 pending. That means that they've started the process. And RSP last year and this year is predicting that we'd be around 900. We did not reach we reached 900, but we teeter back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see where we do end up with kindergarten as we go forward. Our largest I mean, do you want to guess? What's our largest class in the district? What grade? Okay. It's been a battle between 10th grade and second grade, but second grade is the winner this week. And they have, so we get a new one coming out each time, but we are at, for second grade, 930 students, sophomores 928, juniors 925, and fourth grade 924. So those are our biggest classes that we have, but we have very close in there. Our largest elementary is Bennett with 620 students. Largest middle school, Discovery with 1,000. And largest high school is Davies with 1,364. And so just perspective as we look at those numbers. The numbers right now do, every day, we have live numbers we can look at, but we also see kids going in and out. So some kids have transferred. So we'll update you again in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you so much. That's really fascinating. Just a quick question, is the second grade class, was that the post-pandemic? Would that have been the grade that would have held back kindergarten and not started in virtual, and now they're in second grade?
Yeah, they're kindergarten,
Yeah.
Yeah, then first grade 2021, 22.
Okay, great. That's really interesting. So any questions or comments from Ms. or Dr. Gandhi? Thank you both so much. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. I would look for a motion to approve it. Yes, Robin?
I move approval of the consent agenda with the human capital addendum.
New, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Second.
All right, thank you. Moved by Robin, seconded by Tracy. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All right, opposed, same sign, please. Okay, thank you. Motion passes, and we will move on to our business section. We'll start with business 7A, preliminary budget approval, which comes to us through memo 25, and I'll ask Jim to introduce
Thank
this
you.
memo for us.
Yeah, I'll give a brief overview, and obviously Jackie's here, who actually knows this thing inside and out in detail. So if there are detailed questions, I'm going to ask her to participate with us. I want to start by echoing what Dr. Gandhi shared, and just so you understand, Mr. Clark, we are not at all approving a contract with this budget. We are required by law to provide a preliminary budget by August 10th. So we must do it today, or I guess we could get together tomorrow to do it. To comply with Century Code 57-15-02.2. Hence the reason this is part one of a two-part process. We will be back looking at all of these budgets again at the end of September when we need to certify them as final so they can be presented to the county, again, to meet a statutory requirement. I am here to assure you, and Jackie, I'm sure would confirm this, something's going to change in these numbers between now and when we're back looking at them in September. Probably not big changes, but some things will change. But with that, I'd like to walk you through each of these, and then at the end, I'll put forward a motion, and we can open it up for discussion if that seems like a fair approach. So I'm going to start by the general fund, which is clearly the biggest amount of dollars that we have to deal with each year. They really pay for all the operating costs of the district. If you look at the general fund preliminary budget report, you'll see at the bottom of page 1 that we're estimating our total revenue this year to go up 7.3% from where we're estimating it to end last year. Both of those are still estimates, and I would say they're pretty close, not real rough. We believe we're going to see about a 9% increase in local revenue due to property tax increases, and that has nothing to do with a mill increase. That has to do with assessed values of properties going up, new properties coming online, Renaissance zone properties that are now falling out of Renaissance zone protection and now fully assessed. So quite frankly, in my tenure on the board, this is the single largest year we're going to see in net valuation increase. Never have seen a 9% before. And it could end up being a little less. This will not be known for sure until we get farther into the fall. Obviously, we know what the state revenue is projected to be, but again, that too is a number that we still will have some movement because our ADM number is not finalized yet through the state formula. But we're anticipating a fairly significant increase, averaging about 4% for next year on state revenue. So overall, revenue is going to increase about 7.3%. If you go to page 2 of that particular budget, you'll see the beginning of our expenditures, and they carry through to page 3. And our total expenditures are projected to increase by the exact same amount, 7.3%. Jackie and her team have put together a balanced budget at this point in time where our revenues and expenditures are going to equal each other, and our beginning fund balance and our ending fund balance is projected to stay exactly the same, $37,278,460. That, by the way, represents approximately 20% of our general fund operating budget. By general accounting standards, well within an acceptable range, not overly heavy and certainly not underly light. So should help us avoid having to borrow money in the short term as we wait for revenue streams to come in. So that's what's going on in our general fund. One thing I'll point out, just because an audience member shared correct information, perhaps without understanding the context that it came in. As speaker indicated that one of the budget items is going up 4,080%, and he is absolutely correct. That is the number in our budget document. Now, this is because we are moving some tutor costs that had been funded through ESSER dollars back into the general fund budget as we are beginning to wean ourselves off the grant dollars that we got through ESSER. We all, I think, are aware of the fact that we have to determine which parts of the additional supports that ESSER had created can we systemically continue to go forward with. And tutors are certainly part of that. So it's not a new expenditure, it's just coming into the general fund budget as opposed to the grant fund budget. And if you look at the top of the report, especially to the speaker, you will notice this is the general fund report without our grants. And you'll see that's where that movement came from. It really isn't new dollars we're expending per se. So that's our general fund. The next fund I want to take you through is our building fund. And this is what we really use for our brick and mortar needs. And there's actually another fund that feeds into this as well. That's called our special levy fund. So I'm going to take those in that order. First the building fund, then the special levy fund. Before I leave the general fund though completely, again, this budget recommends that we remain at the exact same mill levy, no increase whatsoever. Same is true of the building fund. We currently, under state statute, are allowed to levy $15 million for brick and mortar purposes. That's to build new buildings, buy property, and to maintain the facilities we already have. And as you'll see in the building fund, we are estimating that we are going to see an increase in revenue of approximately, total new revenue or revenue for the year is going to be about $13,230,000. That's quite a bit less than when we had the year before for two particular reasons. We issued the sale of bonds last year for $17,155,000. So that's not happening at this point in time in this budget. Could we take action through the course of the year to issue bonds? Sure, but at this point in time, we haven't. So we really don't have a revenue decrease per se. We're just not looking at the bond issue per se. Total expenditures, which really are primarily for our debt service and some contracted maintenance services, will be about $12,815,000. We're going to add an additional amount to our fund balance in this fund based on our current budget of about $414,000 for the year. So we expect at this point in time, based on the preliminary budget, that we'll have an ending fund balance of $11,975,439. You might, if you're looking at this page and have a pencil handy, want to add a number right on the bottom, and that number would be $1,285,331. That's the fund balance that is in the special levy fund that is actually feeding in annually to this particular building fund. If you look in the middle of the page under revenue, under other sources, you'll see line item 5200, fund transfer. That shows a $5 million transfer of revenue coming into the building fund in this year. That's going to come from the special levy fund, which we'll look at next. The special levy fund was approved by our voters, I could be off on the year, 1 or 2 years, back in 1998, I believe, maybe 97. It was passed at the time they were looking to build Discovery Middle School. And it gave the district authority to levy beyond the 15 mills that state statutes give for building purposes. And we are currently levying 11.35 mills for the special levy fund. And again, this budget is not recommending any increase in that whatsoever, but that will produce revenues of $5,993,000, of which we're going to transfer the bulk of them over to the building fund, and the remainder just sits in this as a fund balance in case we have an additional need to move it in a given calendar year. So separate fund that we have to account for, but it really feeds into the building fund. The next one that I'm going to take you through is the debt service preliminary budget report. And it is a different animal altogether in that it doesn't have its own revenue stream. It's just to let you know what we're going to spend the money in the building fund on. We basically, outside of the contracted maintenance, are paying off the bond payments and the interest on the bond payments that are obligations directly of the Fargo School Board. And so that's what's showing up in the debt service fund. You'll see that we are projecting our revenues at $9,174,300. That's the amount of expenditure coming out of the building fund, which ties in directly to what we saw in the building fund. And that is going to be a combination of 2.7 million plus of interest and 6.4 million of principal. The next fund that we have to approve is actually the special assessment fund. All school districts have the ability to levy a special assessment fund to cover whatever special assessments are levied against district property from the city, the county, or any other taxing authority that could put a special assessment, primarily city in our case. Currently, although we get a few incidental specials each year, as maybe a new sewer line is fixed over by Longfellow or a new street is repaired over by Jefferson, the biggest one we're still dealing with is from when we put Ed Clapp Elementary into its location, kind of out by Essentia Healthcare. So we still have a fairly significant special assessment from the road work that had to be built to actually service that site. So we're allowed to assess what we need to each year to cover those special assessments. Currently, this last year, we were levying 1.25 mills to cover our special assessments. This budget is recommending a reduction of 0.25 mills. We don't believe we need to have the entire 1.25 any longer, as the bill is waning down. So we will be collecting revenues of $531,700, and we will be using that to pay off the specials, and we'll build up a little excess revenue here mostly because we'll get specials applied to through the course of the year as city projects and streets are worked on, and we tend to pay those smaller ones off in full as they come to the district. The last budget, and thank you for bearing with me through all of this, is our nutrition service budget. This obviously is a separate accounting formula that we look at to do all of the food operations of the district, including the personnel costs associated with our food delivery systems. We approved earlier by board action what our meal prices would be for the coming year, and that approval was used to build the revenue streams that you're seeing in this budget. We are projecting a total revenue coming in from local sources of $3,246,800, excuse me, which is slightly less than we budgeted for in the prior year. That's in large part due to the action of the state legislature that is going to help more families, hopefully, with the cost of feeding their children. So we're going to get less from families which are marginally able to afford it, and more in a state support system for that. So that's represented in that revenue shift. You'll see our total revenue for the year for food operations is estimated to be $7,401,900. And again, that was based on our previous board action and what we know we're going to get in federal reimbursement dollars. On the expenditure side, obviously the salary expenditures tie right along with the rest of our staff. We're anticipating a 4% increase. One thing to note here, we ended last year, actually I think we've ended the last couple of years short-staffed in food service and nutrition area. We still have those open positions, so we could see some fluctuation in this budget if those can get filled. And I'm sure there are some people in nutrition services that would love to see them filled. But you'll see our total expenditures are projected to be $8,526,000, which is more than our revenue. We are methodically trying to bring our fund balance in nutrition services down to what the federal guidelines recommend. Now, we're not necessarily punished, but it's by design that we're trying to get this spent down. So even though we generally ask Jackie and her team to not bring us a deficit budget, this is a deficit budget by design to bring us closer to compliance with federal guidelines on what, I say federal, it could be also state, on what we should have for a fund balance in our nutrition service budget. So those are all the budgets that are before us for preliminary approval. We've looked at them pretty carefully at the planning committee. Obviously, there has been a ton of hours and work put in at the building level and by Jackie and her team in the business services area. With that, on behalf of the planning committee, I'd like to move that we approve preliminarily the general fund, the building fund, the special assessment fund, the special levy fund, the debt service fund, and the nutrition service fund budgets, and submit preliminary mill levy certification to the county auditor.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Jim and seconded by Seth. Any discussion? Yes, Robin?
I have two comments and a question. Thank you, Jim, for your thorough report. Thank you for the planning committee and Jackie and her team. This is kind of your big baby for the year. I really thank you also for restating that all funds are statutorily provided for or voter approved. I would also state on the special assessment budget that right now, taxing between entities is a topic of legislative interim studies. And so that is what we're doing right now. The city is taxing another taxing entity, so we're looking at that closely. My small question in the large scope of all of this is what was the CPI percentage that was used for the automatic escalator for Valley Bus? Do you remember? Or perhaps Jackie does?
I don't off the top of my head. It's based on the Midwest CPI index, I believe, but I don't know what that number, 4%?
4? Okay.
4%.
I've heard between
Thank
3
you,
and 9,
Jackie.
so four is better. Okay. Thank you. That answers my questions.
Thanks, Robin. Any other comments or questions, discussion? Oh, sure, Greg.
So that cool 4,000% increase was due to shifting stuff around for ESSER. Was anything else kind of have a similar explanation? Like I'm just looking at some of the larger percentages, like consultants jumping up over 100%. Was any of that due to like shifting of ESSER dollars?
So the tutoring was big ESSER. Consulting could be a combination of a couple things, but even the following board item and a couple of things that we're doing with long-range planning and current facility planning are some of the big ticket consulting items for this year that are unique to this upcoming school year as well. So I can't say that all that is just ESSER for that consulting line item, but I know a big portion is coming from those.
Robin?
A question for Jim, because you work in the financial services industry. Can you explain how common terms are used like reclassification and assumptions? Those are commonly used within the finance industry. And I think some people think assumptions are loosely worded, but they are used within that industry.
Well, sure, although I don't profess to be an expert on either of these subjects, but first of all, it's important to realize this is a budget, right? And this is a forecast of what we believe is going to unfold over the next 12 months. A year from now, well, actually a little more than that because we have to close things out. So probably next September, we'll actually see if we kept this document today, or actually I would say if we keep the final one we're going to approve in September, we can actually see the following September, how close is that to what really happened, okay? Because through the course of this year, as we just heard Missy talk about earlier, we're going to have students come and go. We don't even quite know for sure how many kindergarten teachers we need quite yet. And then we're going to have something else happen midway through the year. I can just about assure you, I think Mr. Hand is in the office here. He's going to have a major equipment failure someplace in some building in this district. It's just going to happen. I don't know what it is. Could be a roof that starts leaking, could be a boiler that does, who knows? So this is where we're starting from. And we have to make some assumptions in that process to get a preliminary look at what we think is going to happen. Now, quite frankly, it isn't planning. It certainly is not me that makes these basic assumptions. They're built based on the history of the district. If you would have asked Jackie last January, maybe I have to go back a little earlier, last November, do you want to use 9% for the revenue forecast on the local property tax? She would have told me, she would have asked me what I had been drinking, okay? Because neither her or I had seen this kind of number before. And we're still, quite frankly, I'm still a little leery of it, but it's what the county is telling us to anticipate. So assumptions are built based on history, but we recognize they can change. Long answer to your question, does that help?
It does. I also, thank you. I know the answers. This is rhetorical. But let's talk about reclassification, because reclassification is common in accounting practices, and that's what caused the 4,000% increase for the tutors going from one budget line to another.
Exactly. And actually, I wouldn't call that one per se a reclassification, because we're actually taking something that was being funded through grants and building the capacity in our own budget. But there are other items in this budget that certainly are getting reclassified as we decide there's a better cost center that should be applied to. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a new expenditure for the district. There are certainly new dollars being spent, and that's the new revenue that we have, okay? It is 7.3% more general fund dollars than we spent the year before, is what we're projecting to spend. And it's gonna go to all kinds of things like salaries, energy, and a multitude of other things. And obviously, we have increased staff needs. We have been hearing loud and clear from our community, both internal and external communities, that we've got behavior issues that we have to address. Those are gonna take resource dollars. There are several new positions built into this budget in education, special ed areas, EL areas, trying to address populations that we know need more resources. So it's a good year. We actually had an increase, but it's just going to allow us to play catch up on something we've been trying to do for a while. Long answer again, sorry.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thanks for a really thoughtful discussion. I think we would be ready to call the roll, Anne Marie.
Christensen,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Day,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Kirkland.
Yes, thank you. Motion passes. We're going to be moving on to item 7B, award of proposals for the facilities master planning. This comes to us through memo number 27, and I see Mr. Hand is here. Do you want to introduce this for us?
Is this on?
Yes.
All right. It's a good thing there's a lot of wood in here. I've been knocking on as Jim talks about all our equipment failures that we could experience. But anyway, the long-range facilities master planning services, we did go through a pretty extensive process similar to what we would if we were choosing an architect for a project or any other major consultant. But the main scope of work of this is to take sort of the phase one of the facility condition assessment and the energy audit and the educational adequacy study that we've been working on, and we expect to see the final results next month, and take that information and turn it into a short-term and long-term capital plan to help address some of the needs and work on evaluating the enrollment figures along with our existing facilities, the usage of the facilities, and help us make determinations how to most effectively utilize space we have and improve the facilities that are in our district. So as part of this, we put out an RFP. We received 5 responses. We evaluated those 5. We shortlisted to 3 consultants. We brought them in for interviews. And we had some really great proposals and some really good teams, many of which would have been very capable and we would have been happy to work with on this. But we were actually really excited when we interviewed Cooperative Strategies. There are, of the metrics we looked at, one of the most important ones that they seem to just really hone in on and have the right answer for was the community engagement part of developing this plan, and everything down to the formula of how you put together a task force that includes a certain percentage of members from the community, of staff, of teachers, of students, of everyone that you need to bring to the table, and have a really breadth of experience at bringing those people together and working through different scenarios and coming up with the best case scenario for Fargo Public Schools. So lots of experience across the country, track record is solid, and we're just really grateful that we have this consultant on board. As far as the cost, it was, this firm was pretty well in the middle of the, as you can see, the cost that we did have submit. The one, because I'm sure the question will get asked, that there was one consultant that was significantly less than the others. There was also significantly less hours, and I'm not sure they really grasped the scope. In fact, their work plan didn't include community engagement in the process. It was more communicating it to the community afterwards. So I'm anticipating that question would come up. That's sort of the short answer of why we did not interview or consider that particular group. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
I think I'll look for a motion so we can start discussion. Yep.
I will move that we accept the proposal from Cooperative Strategies for approximately $179,700 for a long-range facility master planning services and issue purchase orders accordingly.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, moved by Jim and seconded by Seth. Any questions or, yes?
I'll just share, James and Rupak were kind enough to invite planning to actually sit in on the interviews. And I was able to attend two, and I think Seth covered for me on a third. And I thought, quite frankly, the process that you went through to vet and the questions you were asking were spot on. So, nice job.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Gandhi?
Well, it's not specific to the process of awarding the bid. I do think that maybe it'd be helpful if Mr. Hand can explain just a little bit about, because I know that the board has approved previously current facilities condition assessment, what the difference between that is and the long-range planning, especially given the question about the consultants that we are utilizing. What's the return on investment here for the district, and what is it that we're establishing in the scope of work? I think that'd be good for you guys to know, just as a frame of mind for what we're getting.
Yeah, and I'll do my best to be a balance of efficient with time, but give enough info to give you what you need here. So what we're doing now, what you have previously approved, is the facility condition assessment, and we literally have teams of people going through our buildings the last couple weeks and into, I believe, the end of next week. We'll wrap up prior to school starting. And what they're doing is they're going through, and we have a team that is looking at the condition of all the buildings. So what is the age of the building? What does the how does the HVAC system work, or is it almost due for replacement? The windows, enclosure, roof. I mean, very comprehensive study, which we were overdue for. Typically, at a minimum, you should perform these every 10 years. We were coming up on 10 years, and in that 10 years, like we've described before, a lot has happened. Obviously, we went through COVID, and we've had crazy inflation increases, and we've had even at the end of that study, they identified year 11 as a potential big year when it comes to facility needs. And throughout those 10 years, projects were deferred. So we knew that we have a lot of needs facility-wise, and to make the best decisions and plan the process moving forward, we needed to recapture all that information and have the experts come who are third party, gather the data that we had on hand and combine that with on-site assessments. We're also doing an educational adequacy study as part of that process, where they have gone through all the facilities. They examined the design intent of the different spaces in all of our buildings, and they are comparing that to the programming within our different facilities. So if you think of some of our buildings were built before we had maybe in special education, before we had as many breakout spaces and calming rooms and all these unique areas for learning and education that just didn't exist previously. So what this group is doing is comparing our standard, industry standard, and what we have, so that as we go on to phase 2 of this, we can use that as a benchmark or another score, really, I suppose, of our facilities. So we can look at the condition, and the adequacy, the educational adequacy, which both are equally as important as we plan what to do and how to maintain and improve our facilities moving forward. The other piece of that is an energy audit. It's a pretty significant piece where we are studying all the different components in our building that have to do with air quality and heating and cooling, and really studying what we can do to, if there are investments in that we can make to be more efficient operationally. If we can reduce our operational costs, we can be more efficient with our dollars and invest and work to be more proactive as opposed to reactive with general maintenance. So it all ties together, and that can be a consideration as well as we examine our facilities moving forward. So this consultant takes all of that information, which that information, if we were to do nothing else with our facilities, it would give us a maintenance plan, right? How to keep what you have running. And to, again, try to get a little more on the proactive versus reactive, taking care of your facilities and replacing equipment and systems in our buildings. The capital planning consultant comes in and really reviews our educational framework. It works with community to discuss, here are the challenges that we're facing, here are possible solutions and what the result will be, and balance that expenditure versus expenditure along with student experience, along with the operational costs, upfront costs, funding models, all of that to help put together a really comprehensive plan that will have different timeframes, such as, year one. Here's like your critical safety things that need immediate attention that we need to take care of. Here's year three that we need to start, 2 through 4 that we need to start planning for. And if we need to do a capital project or multiple capital projects, we can start the planning process for that. Here's, up to year 10, what in the next few years you need to start planning for. And I didn't mention that also includes, looking at enrollment projections, because that has to be considered as well. So there's a lot to pull together there. And we feel that, the consultant that we've selected will really help us firm up this plan moving forward and really help shape, the next decades of how we manage and design and take care of our facilities. So for a long time, this is gonna have a lasting impact. Sorry, that's the short version. You wouldn't want to hear the long version.
Thank you. Great. Any other comments? Okay. Thanks for putting this together. Oh, Greg, I'm sorry. Got to raise that hand higher, I guess. Thanks.
This may not necessarily be a question for James, but is the actual result of this service our long-range facility plan document, or is it kind of a set of recommendations that would guide the creation or, I guess, update of that document?
That is a good question. So it would be inclusive of a document that you get that shows here's the plan and the scenarios that came together collaboratively with the community group that we pulled together, as well as actually we anticipate it's likely there's going to be some sort of bond referendum needed at some point. I don't think it's a secret that is in the cards for the future at some point. We have needs. Included in this proposal is preparing for if a bond referendum is part of the funding model for the improvements over the next few years, that this consultant will help us gather the right information, communicate that to the community, and make sure that we are being collaborative throughout the whole process, that we are communicating, that we have community involvement, and that we are all engaged in the process.
And I don't have a copy of their proposal in front of me, but do you know approximately how long this process would take?
Yeah, the intent, and we have a meeting with them tomorrow to start talking a little bit more about the details. But I believe it's in, I'd say roughly the bulk of it in the next 4 to 6 months. We should have some pretty substantial deliverables. And some of that kind of depends on, we at the board workshop will have a lot of discussion around this and what the plan looks like and work together to bring this all together. So it's a little bit up in the air, but this isn't necessarily it's not going to take 3 years to put the plan together. By this spring, we should have a pretty solid idea of what comes of this.
Yes, Dr. Gandhi.
One thing I would say is is in addition to a long-range plan, I think one of the pieces that we're looking for as a deliverable down the road with consultation with the board and the community would be a systemic approach to aligning our operations and our facilities, even though we can't expect what we don't know, right? James made the reference that when most of our buildings were built, special education was not at the magnitude that it is today, and they have some unique physical spaces that are needed. We also understand that education is dynamic, and 20 years from now, we won't know that. What we do know is that the current structure for facilities is build, maintain, and then as you identify needs, build again. And in a linear city, that is often becomes geographical as a constraint too. Not knowing what facility needs or economic or construction environments will be 20 years from now, we need to figure out what are some like core values as a community that we want. So regardless of a geographic population, should every building be revisited or modernized on a set schedule? Is that set schedule every 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, regardless of what things are, like just having that piece? And I think that's a plan that we've never had. So we've always been at the mercy of our long-range plans have been based on what our facility needs are. We never have, just as a public entity, the physical capacity or the financial capacity to meet every recycle schedule that we need. So then we make things work. And then as we identify those needs, we put them again as well. And we have some great buildings and phenomenal staff that takes care of it. But just being able to be proactive about that piece and then aligning it to where we want to head to as a district and setting those expectation clears, I think will also be more transparent for taxpayers down the road. Like, this is what we want to do. We want to look at every building on a scheduled basis. And if there's nothing to upgrade, there's nothing to upgrade. But if there is something that could better service our students, then every building throughout town deserves that as well. And being able to provide that proactively to our community, that would hopefully outdate this board, myself, James, or anyone else that's in the district as well.
Yeah, Robin?
Sorry to prolong this. So to that point, do you see this committee that you form or the district forms to rewrite our help us write our guiding principles, or more building specific? Because
Sorry.
Yeah, that would be a question, one of the many decision points that the board would have to consider, right? I mean, when you talk about the possibility of facilities, there are some guiding principles that they're part of the community experience, and I think that is the responsibility of the board to be the elected official to experience that. You could do things a variety of ways. A consultant might tell you that a building could be a K-8 building, or that you should not have a consistent feeder pattern, or do some things differently. But there's a community expectation for us to deliver the educational experience that we want as well. And those are the pieces that we have to take a look together. Really, the goal here is to identify what are the levers that can be manipulated and what are the levers that are non-negotiables as we look at decision-making for facilities moving forward.
thank you.
And one additional deliverable I failed to mention was setting up construction standards for our facilities, which in the end, I think the ROI will, I think that will pay for itself in it, even without all the additional services that we're receiving, because giving the local architects, when we have a remodel or a construction project, a sandbox to play in where they know here's the adjacencies rules, here's the finishes standards that we have, here's all that. It saves a ton of time in design and that pre-design effort. And I mean, that's a pretty huge value that we'll get out of this as well.
Great. Anything else? Okay, I think, Anne Marie, we're ready to call the roll.
Clark,
Yes.
Day,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yep.
Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Brooklyn.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to our final item on the business agenda. It's the committee and liaison assignments coming to you from me through Memo 26. Thank you to everyone who sent me your preferences and requests. It was very difficult to meet everyone's, but I did try to do the very best I could. So we can have any discussion as needed. I'd like to see a motion. Thank you, Jim.
I'll move that we accept the committee and liaison partnership assignments as provided in memo 26 for committee assignments, calendar year 2023-24.
I'll second that.
All right, moved by Jim and seconded by Robin. Any discussion? All right, without any, I will look to have the roll called, please.
Day,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Christensen. Yes. Clark,
Yes.
Kirkland.
Yes. All right, motion passes. We will move on to item 8, board reports, and I'll start with you, Katie.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, thanks. Greg?
I was at the summer picnic. I believe Katie attended that as well. Though I was there substantially longer alongside Seth and Jim as we grilled lots of burgers and chicken. Other than that, I do not have anything to report.
Thanks, Nikki.
Since our reorganization, there hasn't been a whole lot. I too was at the summer picnic, and 2 of my liaison schools have reached out, so we'll get those organized and get that done. Thank you.
Jim?
Well, I personally want to thank the Nutrition Service Department and Anne Marie for coordinating the picnic and making it work as good as always. And certainly want to thank Seth and Greg for helping on the grills. Once again, they made me look good in spite of myself. So we did have a planning meeting since we last met as a board, mostly to cover the budgets we approved this evening. And for the planning committee going forward, which now includes Greg and Tracy, we are actually going to be meeting this coming Tuesday, a week from today, at 7:30 here for our first planning committee meeting, as we have some work to do to get ready for the work session that's coming up later in the month. And I think that's it from me.
All right, thanks. Robin?
Sure. I attended the summer picnic. For Governmental Affairs Committee related items, I am waiting for detailed agendas to be posted for interim legislative committee meetings that I shared earlier. Some of them are coming up sporadically, so nothing has come up for the school district yet. I have been appointed to the North Dakota School Boards Association Governmental Affairs Committee. And then we'll work on a meeting time for the new GAC members, so most likely in September. And then we can establish our work plan and what have you. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Seth?
Given that we're at impasse right now, I've been enjoying myself, not having meetings 4 times a week. But the only thing really to report besides the board picnic was I did, as Jim stated earlier, I did sit in on the last interview for the facilities master plan organization that we interviewed. So that is pretty much all I have to report right now. So thanks.
Thanks, Namal.
Thank you, Sess. I attended the planning committee. That was my last time. Then I was able to attend the board picnic. And then also today I was able to visit my liaison school at Carl Ben. Thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Newman?
Yes, thank you. I too was at the picnic, always a good time. Melissa and I met to sort of have a president handoff situation, and that was really good. Thank you for feeling willing to serve this year. And I was able to do my first liaison visit to North High School. I just had a really wonderful time visiting with Principal Christensen, and both vice principals, Joshua Andrews and Amanda Quintus, were there. And I just heard a lot about the history of North and the kind of the changing landscape and changing makeup of that school, and they're just being really mindful with their plans going forward. And it was overall a really good visit. So I wore my husband's Letterman jacket from 1990s to the visit. That is all.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was really great, and I love that Namal has already gone too. So really, really good to see you guys getting into the schools. So I'm gonna actually start with a huge thank you to Tracy for her past year of service. You were a phenomenal leader of the school board, such a wonderful president. You serve our community with such kindness and integrity and grace, and it's really inspirational. So thank you so much for an amazing year. I have a plaque for you, and there's also a box for you to take it home in so you don't. Okay, then for my report, last week on August 3rd, I met with Grant Kraft and Dr. Gandhi about kind of FEA and superintendent relationships moving forward this year. And then on July 17th, we had a governance committee meeting, and I have set up one of my liaison visits for next week, and then I'm looking to try to get in hopefully before the school year starts, but we'll see how that goes. So I'll be visiting Longfellow next year, which I'm very excited about because I've never ever been in that school before. So, all right. So Seth, do we have a possible executive session?
Do have one, but
Okay.
before, but I think before we do that, I just want to do a quick update on where we're sitting at right now. Yesterday, the 7th, was our deadline for our mediator and the FEA's mediator to meet to establish the third party mediator. That was done at the 11th hour, about 8 p.m. So we got there. So now we have 15 days to set up the meeting, which I believe that puts us at the 28th, Tara, am I right? So within that time frame, we'll have our mediation. I will be getting a hold of everybody on negotiations so that we can have a negotiations meeting prior to that. But that is where we are sitting right now with negotiations. And with that, I will move that we go into executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategy as permitted under North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.1 and 15.1-16-22.
Second.
All right, thank you. Moved by Seth and seconded by Nikki. Any discussion? Yes?
I will try to make this as,
Wait, we gotta vote on it first.
Oh. Oh, wait.
no,
We've moved. We have a motion on the floor. Now we can
discussion.
Yeah.
so like, I'm trying to make this germane to the motion. Just for process piece, I will just say like, well, if we're gonna go to executive session for negotiation strategy, but if board members have questions about logistics of this process, when we come out of negotiations would be when you do that. Because I know mediation and impasse in terms of like what happens second, like, so just trying to get that clarity too.
Thank you so much.
Process questions, wait till we're, yeah.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. All right. Any discussion other than that? Okay, Anne Marie, would you please call the roll for us?
Gullickson.
Yes.
Holden.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Day.
Yes.
Berkland.
Yes, motion passes. Will we be moving or staying?
We can stay.
We can stay.
Okay, we'll stay in this room. Does anyone want to take like a 3-minute break before we? Okay, we'll do that. See you back in a few minutes. it's 7:21. We are out of executive session. And was Tara gonna, are you gonna share with us? Okay.
So at this point, the mediation panel has been completely selected by the board selection, which was Dr. Jeff Schatz. The FEA's selection is Eric Eisenlohr, and together those two individuals selected Deanne Pladsen to serve as the chairperson for the mediation committee. That committee will need to meet before August 28th.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Katie?
Can we ask questions now?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain, I'm curious a little bit more about the actual process, like who will speak at it? Is it public? Is it just the three of them that speak? Do the chairs make comments? How does that work?
It's detailed in the contract, and basically the each side can give an opening statement, and then from that point, then brainstorming starts, the discussion starts, caucuses can be taken. It's almost like negotiating again, but with mediation helping out through the process. And then if we get to an agreement, we sign a tentative agreement and we get a contract. If we don't agree, we go to fact finding.
Thank you.
And if you want a little more detail in my synopsis, it is in the contract under the mediation section. I believe Article 3.
Great. Any other questions about process? Okay, then I will just affirm our next regular meeting date, which is on August 22nd at 5:30, and it is 7:23, and we are adjourned.